24 Hours of PaaS Summit Preview 2018. We are excited you could join us today for Mico's use section. Sneak peek today, Data Storytelling 101. These 24 Hours of PaaS consist of 24 consecutive live webinars delivered by expert speakers from the PaaS community. The session will record and post online after the event. You will receive an email letting you know when the recordings are available. My name is Ashish Sharma and I am Senior Software Engineer from Nepal. I have few introductory slides before I hand over the reins to Mico. If you require technical assistance, please type your question into the question pane located on the right side of your screen and someone will assist you. This question pane is also where you may ask any questions throughout the presentation. Feel free to enter any questions at any time, and once we get to the question and answer portion of the session, I will read your questions aloud to the speaker. You are able to zoom in on the session presentation content by using the zoom button located on the top of the presentation window. Please note that there will be a short evaluation at the end of the session. Your feedback is important to us, so please take a moment to complete it. This will pop up after the webinar ends in your web browser. Next. If you require technical assistance, please type your questions into the question panel. Sorry about that. I would like to take a moment to thank our presenting sponsor, Quest. The staging of 24 hours of PaaS would not be possible without their generous support. And they are the reason this event is available free of charge. If you would like to learn more about Quest and sign up for information on how they can help you, please visit the sponsor page of the 24 Hours of PaaS website. Next, please. PaaS is a global non-profit association where data professionals connect, share, and learn. Joining PaaS is free and gives you access to hundreds of hours of free online content, live virtual and in-person events, ability to join local groups in your area, and the opportunity to attend an annual conference, PaaS Summit. PaaS is a great way to connect with like-minded professionals, increase your technical expertise, and grow your career. This 24 hours of PaaS session is presented by Mico. She is a BI veteran, teaching thousands globally how to harness the power of data visualization to create real business results. Mico speaks and blogs about everything business intelligence related and is the author of Data Visualization for Dummies. Mico is the founder of BI Branch, a leader in enterprise visual solutions, and the BI Dashboard Formula coaching series, focusing on helping enterprises embrace a more visual culture. Her company has worked with leading organizations such as Kimberly-Clark, Shell, Nestle, Qatar Gas, Ericsson, and FedEx. Without further delay, here is Mico with Sneak Peek Data Storytelling 101.
Hey Ashish, thank you so much. Can everybody hear me out there? Yes, am I clear? Ashish, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you clear.
Okay, good. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So Ashish, thank you so much, and I apologize for flip-flopping the slides a little bit. I think I was hitting the wrong button, so sorry about that, guys. So I'm excited to be here this morning. To add on to my bio, I did put some links here. So for those of you who want to connect with me once this is over, you can just find me at Micoyuk, Micoyuk. I primarily use LinkedIn, Twitter, and sometimes Facebook. I also did provide my email. I know that once I go through this content, I get a lot of questions. One thing Ashish didn't mention, because I know we have a global audience, is that BI Brains actually has, I put 3 global offices because I don't count the US, but there's 4. We actually have an office here in Atlanta, Georgia. For those who are in the US, we have one in London, one in Cape Town, and we recently opened one in the Caribbean and Jamaica. So anyways, with that said, I'm excited to be here. Some of you may know me from our Analytics on Fire podcast. Others of you may know me from our BI Ashford formula methodology, but either way, you guys are gonna love the information that I'm about to present. Okay, so we have a really packed agenda. So this is gonna be, guys, all about data storytelling, perhaps one of my favorite subjects, but unfortunately, it happens to also be one of the most confused subjects because there's so many different interpretations. So what I'm going to focus on today is, one, the power of visual storytelling. And for those of you guys who are just kind of listening in, you are actually going to go through a brain test while looking at the screen. So make sure that you have visibility to the screen because it's going to go by quickly. The other thing we're going to do then is we're going to spend most of our time focusing on 3 keys to create a compelling data story. And so our key one is to follow what I call the design requirements triad. So this by itself is probably going to be worth the entire webinar, but we are going to teach you guys some very hard lessons learned after we've built about 600 plus data visualizations, and the key to really making sure that you get good user adoption. We're also going to take a look at the questions that you should never ask, something that unfortunately I wish I learned earlier in my career. And then we're going to finally take a look at every data story has 4 parts, okay? And then I'm going to tell you guys what's next for those of you who want to learn more. And then I'm going to give you guys a very long list. It's like a size font, like 10, I think, of my favorite handpicked visual storytelling resources. Again, I know this topic is really popular within analytics, the BI, and even the data science arena, but I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started, guys. So when it comes to visual storytelling, right, the key to unlocking actionable insights is to understand that human beings are all wired visually. And I always say this because a lot of people are caught up in these cycles where they're building reports or they're being asked to build a bunch of reports and they're wondering what's going on. So to set the tone for the rest of this presentation, the one thing I want to confirm to you using some stats here is that we are all wired visually. And to prove that, there's a few things I want to point out. Number one, you can see here, visual content generates 94% more views. So that's one of the reasons why this presentation is going to be very visual, or it's going to be very minimal text, because I want your retain of the information to be high. Number 2 fact, which I think is interesting on the right, is that visuals are processed 60,000 times faster than text. I mean, that in itself is just a little bit crazy. It's not like 60 times, it's 60,000 times, right? Which is powerful. But then I think the most important part of this, and you see on the bottom left corner, because I don't have my pointer, is to state that, can we mute out the background? I'm hearing some core noise. Can everybody else mute out the background, please? Thank you. So the most important part to state is that we retain 80% of what we see, 20% of what we read, and 10% of what we hear. And so that's, again, very important because, you know, it's interesting when we're in this analytical world, people are consistently asking for these reports. And one just begins to think, what are we really retaining? Okay, so this particular stat in the bottom to me is, I'm still hearing background noise. Can everybody mute out, please? Even on the pass side, it's very loud. Thank you. Okay, so anyway, so so we retain 80% of what we're seeing and only 20% of what we read. And the reason why that stat was important when I learned it is because, again, as I keep seeing people requesting these multiple pages of reports, I just, in my brain, I was like, I can't believe that anybody's actually reading this stuff. Okay, so storytelling is really important. Now, to understand how powerful it is, I actually put this visual up, and it's something that I put up quite often. It's not mine. I'll provide the link for it. It's actually an infographic, but it's important for you guys to understand how visual storytelling differs from other things and why it's so important. So when we tell stories, it actually has a different effect on the brain, okay? So the first thing that happens, without getting too scientific, is forget the process. It's called neurocoupling, but the most important thing is that when you tell a story, the first thing that happens is that people turn the stories into their own ideas and experiences, okay? And so this is similar for data stories, which we'll get to in a minute. Once that's done, they begin to mirror themselves into that experience, right? So they begin to see themselves there. And then the third thing that happens, which I think is phenomenal, is they experience a dopamine release where they have an emotionally charged event. Now, the interesting part about this whole science, guys, of visual storytelling is I have a few theories around this. But if you compare building reports to building data stories and data visualizations, right? I think what happens, I don't know about you guys, but I've been like caught up in these discussions where people are super focused on colors or super focused on, what chart to use. And my theory is that they are caught up in some type of dopamine over release. Okay. So I hope some of you are laughing, but when I learned about the effects of storytelling, I was both excited because I realized that on like a report, right, if we're using visualizations and storytelling, we can get people to really react, and in this case to take action. But I also realized that used incorrectly, it could have the adverse effect. More importantly, what I learned is that in BI, a lot of times in business intelligence, we are using it incorrectly. And that's why we kind of end up with users that either just want reports or they're very focused on the wrong thing, which is the color of the chart or the type of chart. Okay, so with that said, before I get started on the keys, I actually want to do a quick brain test. So to get you guys started, this will take approximately, it takes about 10 seconds of silence. I'm going to go to the next screen. Okay, so I want everybody's eyes focus on the screen. This is really important. We're about to learn what side of the brain you guys use. And a lot of people don't know if they're left or right brain thinkers. So I want everybody to sit down really quickly and just shut up everything for 10 seconds. Okay, is everybody ready to go? Can I see a quick raise of hands here if we're able to raise hands? Everybody ready to go? Okay, this is very cool. So I'm going to go to the next screen, and what you're going to do is I want you guys to quietly say the colors and not the words. And I'm going to go quiet for 10 seconds. So I want you to say the colors and not the words, okay? So focus. Okay, I did the test with you. How many of you are done? Okay, so here's the cool part. So which side of the brain did you use? If you read the words, you are using the right side of your brain. If you read the colors, you are using the left side of your brain. So let me ask a question. How many of you are using the right side of your brain? Can I get some hands, or in the chat say yay? Okay. Now, how many of you are reading the colors, which means you are using the other side of your brain? Actually, this is swapped. I'm sorry. If you're reading the words, you're using the left side. If you're reading the colors, you're using the right side. How many of you are reading the colors, which means you're using the right side of your brain? How many of you are using both? Because because I've done this so many times, I did the quiz with you guys, so I was using the right side of my brain. But how many of you felt like you were switching in between? Right? Very interesting experience. So here's why and thank you guys for taking the test. Here's why this is important, okay? When it comes to visual storytelling, it actually requires that we use the right brain thinking and words. So if you look on this diagram, you could see that the left brain is where we have our hard skills, where we have like our data and our technical skills, where we focus on math and science. But actually on the right hand side is where storytelling sits. And so this is the part of our brain that many of you are aware of, where we're a bit more creative, a bit more curious, a bit more collaborative. And so in analytics and in our field, we're forced to be very analytical, but in order to do proper storytelling, you actually have to use both. So I like to do that exercise. And don't worry, if you're left brain, there is a lot of great exercises to activate the right brain when you need it. So don't be worried if you're left brain. If you're in the middle, that's kind of where I am, but I've gotten a lot better at turning it on. So now that we know where storytelling sits in the brain, which is important, again, this is all building up for you guys to understand the importance of this. And I want to take a look at some of the best stories ever told. So one thing that's interesting is a lot of people don't realize that storytelling actually originated in Hollywood. So one of my favorite stories has to be the Spider-Man trilogy. Do I have any Spider-Man fans here? I'm pretty sure I do. Okay, so I love Spider-Man. Now, the good thing about Spider-Man is it's sold about $890.9 million worldwide. A matter of fact, it's probably on its way to easily being $1 billion movie. But the great thing about all these movies, whether it's Jurassic Park or it's Transformers, or you can name it, the Titanic, all good stories, and in this case, have three parts, okay? They have a beginning part where you have boy likes the girl has no idea, okay? Then you have the middle, I know you guys know where this is going, where the girl gets captured by the villain, right? And then of course you have the beautiful ending where the boy defeats the villain, he's a hero, and he saves the girl. Now the cool part about this is that Hollywood has used this particular story, right, over and over again in different sequences. As I mentioned, the Titanic, movie after movie, and has made billions, if not in this case, maybe trillions over the course of how many years, right? But we still go to the theater, we still get excited. Now, I went and I finally digged up what is online known as the Spider-Man visual storyboard. I got a screenshot of it. So you could see here that before they put the movie into motion, they actually sit down and they kind of scope out exactly what the scenes are, okay? So you might be asking yourself, okay, what does this have to do with a data story? Well, the reality is that just like a Hollywood blockbuster story, every good story also has 4 parts, and that's the premise of what I'm going to teach you. So the first part is the goal. The second part of the story of a good data story is your KPI snapshot. The third part is your trend or causes, and the fourth part is your actions, okay? So again, I figured that, look, if Hollywood could do it, so could we in data, right? I mean, we want to make sure that we keep people intrigued. Now, what I'm going to show you guys today on the webinar is a part of what I call my Be at Ashford formula methodology. I put it 6.0 at this point because we actually released this in 2012. And as Ashish mentioned, we have a number of big customers across the world. Shell is one of our big champions, but we've since have the likes of Nestle and Ericsson, a number of companies that utilize it. And the area here, that circle, is what we're going to focus on in the webinar today. Okay, so this is a pretty end-to-end process, which is focused on creating data visualizations in less than 90 days. But for the sake of this webinar, to make sure you guys get maximum value, in the past community, I am going to focus just on the second part, which is on the requirements gathering and scoping, and particularly the storytelling. However, the end-to-end methodology is premised on 5 steps, where you plan, scope, design, develop, and test and launch your data visualization within a 90-day or less period. And it comes with like all the templates and everything, okay? So I'm not going to spend too much time on here, but I wanted to preface you guys with where it's from. So what we're going to focus on as a part of that step 2 is we're going to take a look at this visual storyboard example, which essentially then becomes a visualization and go forward. So remember I mentioned to you that every story has 4 parts. So if you look on here, this is what we call our visual storyboard. This is actually our Be at Ashford formula visual storyboard. And you can see here that even though I have a screenshot with these Post-its, we actually physically print this or use it online, and you guys will learn how to do it as well. And we actually work with users, or you can work by yourself to really extract your story, okay? A little bit more about that later on. So you're probably asking yourself, as I showed you the stories and we've seen a storyboard, again, how does this apply to BI? So I figured I'd show you guys some early examples. So this is a good example of a report, or we were told it was a dashboard, to be honest, I guess because of the half donut pie charts, with no story. Okay, now you could see here on the right hand side, once you apply a story, this is the exact same data on the left in a story format. So on the left is when someone said, okay, listen, let's get data together, and let's try to create some type of visualization, which AKA is really a report. On the right hand side is where we actually took that data, we used the storyboard, and then we were able to create the visual story on the right, sorry. Here is a good another example. You can see here that this is actually a company example, which is why it's blurred out, of their quote unquote dashboard story. Okay, so we took a look at this and we said, okay, this is interesting, right? This is their dashboard story. On the right hand side, after we did the storyboard, you could see that we have the exact same data and information. We do, I promise you, because people have questioned us. And on the right hand side is the exact same data, but it's using our visual storyboarding format. So I thought you guys would find this intriguing, because what we found through doing this process, right, and doing the Ashford formula, is that it's night and day when it comes to really creating visuals. So let's take a look now at the 3 keys to really creating a compelling data story. And this is my favorite part. So I hope you guys are taking notes. So data story key number 1 is what I call the requirement gathering triad. Okay, guys? Now, before I even get into this triad series, I'm going to tell you guys a quick story. So when I started my career, and there's not a slide for this, this is just a story really quick. I started out in New York, and I was actually consulting for Pfizer. And I was really young at that point. I don't want to age myself. I was like in my 20s, and I was asked to gather requirements with a number of executives. And at that point, I was really good at creating visualizations in a tool called Excelsius, which is a business objects tool. And I thought I knew what I was doing, but I ended up going into these meetings initially with these high level, they were EVPs, senior management, and everything was coming at me so fast that I just like, I didn't know what to do. Like I kind of crumbled, right? Like this is what happens to a lot of people today. We get in a room and we don't know what to do, because we're getting everything from the data requirements to what chart to use to here's my Excel sheet. And so the first thing that really was a breakthrough for me is when I realized that users, based on understanding how the brain works, aren't able to do all the requirements at the same time. So from there, what I did is I developed what I call the Ashford formula, requirement gathering process breakdown, or the triad. So the first thing that you need to understand is that when you're going in and you want to build these data stories and visualizations, you have to focus first on the data requirements. And that's where the data storyboard comes in. Then you can focus on design requirements, and then you can focus on data validation, and then your functional requirements, and then you finalize design. So one of the things that we learned was a game changer is that initially we would do all of this at once. So we'd get in, we'd hear the requirements. I'd start to like build it in my tool. Let's say it's Power BI. I would go back into the user, and then I would get like just hammered. Okay. Then I realized, okay, this is not working. These sessions take forever. I never get out of here. And so I now live by what I call the requirement gathering triad, where the first thing I do is I gather the data requirements, then I do the design requirements and the data validation in the background, and then I do functional requirements. Again, I mentioned earlier that if you're not doing this, you're essentially setting yourself unfortunately up for failure. Okay, there's so many tips I could give you because I've done this hundreds of times successfully, but I failed a lot before I started. This is one of the biggest breakthroughs. And so this data requirement area is where we're going to focus on. And again, for those of you who are wondering, remember, in case you forgot, the key in the beginning is that you want to avoid any type of design discussion because we are wired visually. And unfortunately, if you go down the design talk or discussion too early, you simply lose people. Okay, so I hope that makes sense to everybody. So that was like a real breakthrough for me and a number of our clients and customers. And so now we focus first on the data story. Okay, so the second breakthrough that I had, which I want to share with you, right, when it comes to creating compelling data stories, is what questions never to ask. So you literally want to never ask these questions, but unfortunately, they're some of the most common questions ever asked. So number one on the never ask list, I hope you guys are paying attention or screenshotting or doing something. This is deadly. Like I wish I could put like a knife in it somewhere. Sorry to be graphic, but seriously, never ask users, what do you want to see? Okay. Never ask them, how do you want it to look? And never ask them, what do you want to measure? Now, if you are not looking at the screen, I want you to look at it so you retain this slide in your brain. Not to mention, you may take a picture of it. These questions, to me, can tell me, if you ask these questions, I can tell you without a doubt that your project's probably going to fail. Okay. And I know some of you are going, wait, what? I asked that question like 5 minutes ago in a meeting. Correct. So here's the problem, right? When you ask people what they want to measure, the answer they're going to tell you, right? Or you ask them, for instance, what do they want to see? It's actually really simple. Everything. I mean, every single thing. That is exactly how you got to that visualization I showed you guys, right? If you ask users what they want to see or what they want to measure, listen, you might as well just pop open the database and hand them the cubes, okay? They literally want to see everything. So you want to make sure that you completely avoid this question. My next favorite one has to be, how do you want it to look? Now, when you ask that question, here you go again, right? You just get users stuffing everything they possibly can on the screen to where you have data overload, visual overload, people cannot comprehend. Now, again, I'm not pointing out this particular dashboard. It was just an example I saw online, to forgive me if the author ever sees this, but this is not usable in my opinion. This is a very, very busy dashboard. And I honestly can guarantee that if I were to find a human being who created this and ask them how you got here, they probably ask someone, how do you want it to look, or what do you want to see? Okay. So again, you want to make sure you avoid this with all costs. And then my favorite one, we go back to this last question again, is what do you want to measure? And so again, how do we get to the likes of visuals like this? Is by asking these questions. So those 3 questions, guys, what do you want to see? How do you want it to look? And what do you want to measure? I really want you guys to completely erase those from your vocabulary, because I can tell you without a doubt, you're never going to get the right answer. Okay. So now that you're aware of that, and I know that I've literally probably saved a few projects here and saved some people a lot of time, this one tends to be an eye-opener, and it was to me as well, because, you know, what do you want to see was the first question I go in and ask, honestly. And then I realized that all these answers were varied and I would just get slammed. And so now, based on our BS reform methodology, I have a very kind of set process we go through using the storyboard and the questions we need to ask. Okay. So now you have the 2 first keys. One is you now understand how to gather requirements more in the triad process, where you're not doing everything at once. And number 2, you now know what questions not to ask and why. So the last key that I want to focus on is what I call data story key number 3, which is going back to every story having 4 parts. And I'm going to explain each of those parts as it pertains to the storyboard. So again, we talked about this. We talked about the story having its goal, its beginning, its middle, and its end. Okay. So remember, I showed you guys this example. You can see here we have on the left-hand side, as I showed you, we have our goal on the top, we have our snapshot, we have our trends, and we have our actions. So let's go through each of these elements one by one. So part 1 of your storyboard has to be your goal. And the interesting part about goals is you guys will probably notice that when it comes to goals, we actually define them very clearly. And for those of you who are going to be attending the workshop, or you decide to go to the next level, we actually show you exactly what questions to ask, along with this hack technique that I created in order to create what we call measurable goals. So in this case, the first thing that we have here is we have our executive sales pulse storyboard. And our goal here, right, which needs to be defined very clearly, and is the first thing you define, is we want to grow our ROI by 12% or 20 million by December 2018. So again, the first thing you want to start up with is your goal. The second part of your data story, which is important, is your snapshot. And I call it KPI snapshot, but snapshot for short. And so in this element, you'll notice that I created 2 different segments. So number 1 is you want to make sure you limit this down to no more than 5 KPIs. But more importantly, you could see on the left-hand side in the yellow and green, I have two KPIs which we transformed into measurable and actionable. And on the right-hand side, I have two KPIs that are typical of what users give us. Now, I don't have time to go into within this webinar to show you how we transform them. But if you look on here, the tip I'm going to give you is this. When we ask the users how they essentially plan to grow their ROI, what KPIs they need to look at, again, asking the right questions, they basically told us on the left, you could see monthly sales, customer churn, customer satisfaction, and the top selling SKUs. And what we did on the left is using our methodology is we transformed the first two into measurable. So one exercise I recommend for those of you who are going to go back is the key to this is you'll probably realize that when I say customer satisfaction on the right, you have no idea what I'm talking about. But when I tell you that in order to hit our goal to grow ROI, we need to trim, which is in the green, our customer churn by region by 5 to 10% of customers quarterly. Now you're super clear on what needs to be done. So the biggest thing when it comes to this KPI snapshot and what you're measuring to hit your goal is one, you need to limit it to 5, and 2, you need to make sure it's super clear. And again, this is something that we go into depth in teaching. The third part of your story is now your causes. So this is very simple, right? It's saying, listen, based on my KPI, right, if it's not on target, what trends or what could have caused it? And you see here when it comes to customer churn, which is, for those of you who don't know what churn is where you're gaining new customers, but you're also losing them. So you're kind of measuring, you know, if I gain 2 new customers and I lose 4, my churn is negative, for instance. So in this case, we're saying, okay, I have this goal to grow ROI, and I know in order to do that, I need to trim my customer churn by region by a certain amount. If I'm not trimming it by that 5% quarterly, the question is why not? So you see we have the no, and in this case, we identified 5 causes or reasons why that's not happening. And again, within trends, we don't have time to go over it. It's something we teach in a workshop. I'll show you guys how to identify trends or causes that actually matter. And the fourth part of your story is the most important, but forgotten, right? It's the action. That's part 4. So the question is, what next action can you take that will fix your trends? So in this case, you could see that now that we actually understand our goal, we understand the KPI that we need to look at our KPIs to hit our goal, we understand the trends that may be causing them to be on or off target, then we go down to the actions and we figure out, okay, now that we understand what's causing the problem, how do we fix it? In this case, it was high pricing is why our churn was off. And we're stating that in order to fix our high pricing, we can either study our competitors or start offering discounts or both. So again, guys, you could see here this 4-part story, which seems fairly logical, is very important. And using our storyboard, we break it down very, very simply for you guys, okay? All right, so if you guys have any questions on this, I'll be doing the questions at the end. I'm gonna highly recommend that you guys come in here if you wanna get your questions answered. So now I'm gonna show you guys feel free to post in the chat. I'm gonna show you guys an example of how this actually works. Okay, so going to a real world case example, this is actually our storyboard before we simplified it. This is a use case that we recorded for a $5 billion university, right? Because some of you would be asking, okay, I get this. So I create my story, now what? And so I want to show you guys how this process translates into a data visualization. So this is an example of a real storyboard that one of our clients created, which was phenomenal. They call it their executive planning tool. It's a success story, actually. And you could see here that essentially what we did is we took that story. This is the exact story translated into a data visualization, guys, okay? And this is actually the mock-up of a data visualization. And then this is their final design. Now, the important part about this, and I'll go back up again and show you guys, is from end to end, even starting on data, because the good thing is that when you do the story correctly, right, all these elements like data validation that you're currently caught up in, it's like a cycle of never ending craziness. All of that is hashed out in the beginning before you get to visualization. So what we were able to do is we were able to go from the beginning concept of this all the way into launching this to where it got actually live press for their president, this particular company or university within a 8-week period. So I wanted to show you guys an example of how this works in the real world because I think it's important. And this goes back to what I was saying before. Storytelling is indeed a game changer. I can't emphasize enough, and I keep showing this because this to me is a perfect example of what things look like with us without a story and with a story. Again, this is what it looks like without a story and with a story, right? It's really, really a game changer. Okay, so let's go through this one more time. So the step one here, because I want to kind of bring this all together, is I showed you guys essentially how and where to focus on a story. I gave you guys the 4 parts. I told you what questions not to ask. Again, I don't have time to go into exactly how you transform your goal and your KPIs and your trends and even your actions. That requires a bit more time, and I'll give you guys more details later on. But what you do is once you go from there, you then transform this into what we call a wireframe structure, right? So we go from story to wireframe. We then will show you guys how essentially you add the visuals and then you turn it into visualization. So what we've done is, instead of what typically happens where people open up with a blank canvas and they're trying to create visualizations, we first focus on the story, and then we take that story and we transform it quickly into visualization. So I want to go back here quickly for those of you who didn't catch that. So again, essentially what we do is we very quickly go from this, which is your data story and your data requirements. We then start doing our visual wireframe, right, which is then black and white. We add our charts. This is the exact same story. And then we add color, and we basically build this out. And all of our stories can be built in any tool. So this exact same story was built in Power BI, Excel, Tableau, and what's that other tool? I think it might have been Burst. I'm not sure. I don't want to lie. I think it might have been Burst or SAP Lumira. But either way, for us, tools are not that important. We're more focused on the user and the story, and I think you guys should be as well. Okay, so I want to leave time for questions. What I did do here is for those of you who want to get to the next level, there are 2 things. Number one, I handpicked a number of data, I picked a number of visual data storytelling resources for you guys. So not only is there a number of white papers where this has been mentioned before, the top link, which is the KPI analyzer white paper, actually goes into exactly how to transform your KPIs to make sure they're actionable. I then listed a set of articles. I put our podcast in there, and then I listed 2 of my favorite books. Some of you are familiar with Cole Nussbaumer. She has a Storytelling with Data, a guide for data professionals. Again, I think the slight difference between her and what I do is, and I love her stuff and her actually, is that she focuses more on telling your individual story, whereas I'm focused on working with teams and making sure that you get the user story, okay? Not just your story, because you're building for users. Then you actually have Dan Rome, who I like a lot. So for those of you who felt you were either too left brain or you want to work heavily on your right brain, I actually had a call with him last week. Dan Rome it's the last book on the bottom, the back of the napkin book. I love his stuff. His Visual Academy is like $20 a month. It's amazing. And then for those of you who want the storyboard template, I put a link on the top. If you go to bivisualstorytelling.com after this webinar, you can get your download of the actual template so you guys can start using it. Okay, so I want to leave about 10 minutes to questions. So those of you who have seen this, there's some of you who are thinking, okay, what's next? So if you want more information, you guys have 2 options. Number one, if you're coming to pass, last year my workshop was sold out. You can definitely join the live workshop. I'd love to have you. I am expecting it to sell out again this year. It's very intense. The reviews are very high. I don't know where it rated overall. I know it was rated very highly, but we are going to have a blast. So what we do in there is we go deep into the story, deep into visualization, and we really teach you, how to use a storyboard to engage your users, ask the right questions, and then produce what we call high user adoption dashboards and reports. Okay, very important stuff. If not, we also have an online course, which you guys can find out more about as well. We also have partnered with Pass on this. And so essentially, for those of you who can't attend the live workshop, you can also find out more about our online course. That entails about 20 hours of training, a number of templates. We give you checklists for everything. And then there's some weekly live Q&As with me every quarter and a few bonuses. Okay. So with that said, I wanted to leave about 15 minutes. I think Ashish is going to come back on to see if we have any questions. Ashish, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you for the great session.
Thank
Actually,
you.
there is a question.
Okay.
Tom is asking, What should be the start questions?
What should be the start questions, just so I'm clear?
Yeah. You mentioned what not to ask in the start.
Yes.
So he's trying to ask what should be the start questions to that we can
Sure.
ask.
So one of the keys of using a storyboard is there's actually 5 questions that we teach you to ask. The initial question that you focus on, and you can write this down for those who are listening, is we tend to start with asking one of 2 questions. Number one is we ask, what does success look like? And so what that means is when we sit down with users, instead of saying, what do you want to see? We take a higher level approach and ask them, what does success look like? Or we ask them, what is your goal for this project, for this dashboard, for this report? So the first thing before they start popping open data and giving us their wish list is really just trying to figure out what the end goal is. And that typically is where we begin to peel the onion for the goal. And then from there, we go into the 4 other questions using a storyboard that you need in order to flesh out their KPI snapshot, their trend, and their actions. That's a great question. Thank you, Tom. I hope that answered the question. Okay, Ashish?
Yeah, actually, that was the only question.
Oh, good.
And
Okay.
another is your slide deck for this presentation is available?
Yes, so the slide deck will be available to everyone. The links and everything will be in there. That's why I wanted to put some links, because whenever this is presented, I know people typically want to get their hands on a storyboard and they want to get moving. Again, for those people who will not, who want to go to the next level, I encourage them to join us at the live workshop at PASS, but you'll definitely be able to download a storyboard as well as download the slides. And I think, Ashish, wherever you guys provide it, we'll make sure that's available to everyone else.
Yeah, this was asked by the Jean. I hope this answered her question.
Yes, you guys will definitely get the slides. I do want to emphasize a few things since we have just a few minutes here. I'm not going to use up all of it because I know you need to wrap up, Ashish. One thing that's very important, because I feel that a lot of people are very tied over to tools. They're tied to their tool, is that when it comes to focusing on data stories, please do not focus on the tool that you're using. We found that if we focus on a story and we focus on going through this process seamlessly, not only do we engage the users on a higher level and get their buy-in early, right? But we also make sure that whatever is being produced, because we're focused on these stories, is actually buildable in any tool. What we find that goes wrong is people tend to focus too much on, the tool that's going to be used and how it's going to look and all this stuff. That's where failure happens. And I didn't put the stats out, but 7 out of 10 BI projects are deemed as failures. That was something Gartner put out a few years ago, and it still is. And so one of the things that I became obsessed with, because earlier in my career, when I was in New York, I failed a lot until I learned some of these core elements and was able to start working and testing them, is that, focusing on BI tools, continually building reports, this does not get people to take action. So the reason why the storyboard is useful and powerful is we found that you're really focused on the user experience, but you're focused on engaging the user from day one. And once you do that properly and you ask the right questions, you tend to avoid a lot of the mishaps that happen later on. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, there is another question from Ji Wong, and it is, what are the best roles in company suitable for using storyboard method, or either for QA, management, or developers?
Sure. Just a little bit slower. You said, what are the best tools for, sorry, could you do that slower,
What are the
Ashish?
best roles
Yes,
in the
rules.
company suitable for using storyboard method?
The best rules you said in the company?
Yeah,
Oh,
roles.
oh, okay. And then you said, what was the ending of it? You said 3 things at the end.
I will read the question again. What are the best roles in the
Yes.
company
Uh-huh.
suitable for using storyboard method, either from QAs or from management or for the developers?
Oh, okay, I got it. I'm sorry about that. So you can actually use it across the board. We've actually done this at all levels of organizations, as well as many of our clients and students. Again, we started this journey in about June of 2012, and so it's been used from everything from doing like IT networking dashboards, for instance, all the way up to the board of some of the largest companies in the world. So it's really, again, because it's focused on the user story, it's not the level of the story you're focused on, it's the user you're focused on and making sure that you gather their story. So the level isn't as important as making sure that you have the right users. That's a great question. Yeah, a lot of people tend to think that this storyboarding is for just executives, and it's not. I did show an example that was for executives, but again, whether we've done it in warehouses, in supply chain warehouses, in manufacturing plants, it works across the board. Just focus on the user and their story and understanding their needs.
I hope that has answered his question.
Yes, that was a great question. I forgot to address that.
Okay, and I think
is there any more questions? Is anybody going to try this?
There is a question, I think, from
Sure.
Steven. He want to ask, were you still planning to reviewing tools? Are you still planning to review tools? Or
To
which
review
tool
tools?
which tool will be good for storytelling? I think it's the question was that he want to ask.
Okay, so I'm gonna assume that you're talking about technical tools like Power BI or Tableau. Yeah. I'm gonna assume that, correct?
Yeah, Stephen has written, were you still planning to review tools? So I'm probably this may be the question. Yeah, he says yes.
Okay, so I have my personal preferences, and I'll share that with you, but I have my reasons for my personal preferences because this is one of the number one questions I get asked. My first preference is Power BI today. And I have two reasons for that. Number one, our millennials in the company love it for ease of use. As I'm sitting here in our office, they're actually building different dashboards on it for some projects. They actually like it better than other tools because of simplicity. And number two, we're seeing a lot of our clients migrate to Power BI, both from other tools like Tableau and other legacy tools. The second one would probably have to be Tableau. Now, I will say to me that Tableau does a few things very well. It does data discovery well. So if you want to do data discovery, and it obviously is a bit more advanced. So I always make the comment that you can do anything you want in SQL with Tableau, whether be it easy or hard, that's a different story. However, I think that two areas where I've seen clients start to complain is one around the pricing. I think their pricing has gotten a bit higher. And number two, I think it's become complex to get simple things done. But I do think Tableau is a powerful tool. I think that if I had to pick a number three today, because we also have used Click and Burst. I think between Click and Burst, there might be a tie, to be quite frank with you. I think Click is really powerful. ClickView, it does a lot of reporting things very powerful. It kind of has its own system. I also think Burst is fairly powerful. And again, I'm talking about strictly data visualization. And of course, there's Excel. So I think for me, again, right now, Power BI is powerful. Yes, it doesn't do everything Tableau does, but it's way easier to use, in my opinion. It's a bit faster to deploy. And I think Microsoft is innovating at lightning speed. So I'm a huge fan. I hope that answers the question.
Hopefully, I think.
Yes.
So as there are no questions further, I think you can continue, or we can. Yeah, we can either you can continue or we can end up the session.
Yeah, I think we only have 7 minutes left. So I think on my end, I just want to thank everybody for attending. Like I said, I mentioned before, I put my Twitter handle on there, but if you're on LinkedIn or Facebook, you can feel free to add me. And I also put my email address. If you guys do have questions, this particular email is just for like community stuff. So feel free to ask me questions if you have it. But I really hope that going through this presentation, whatever you're doing today, like I said, this process can either be used for an audience or it can be used for yourself. You can also use it for a new initiative, or you can use it for an existing initiative. Like if you have reports of your own or different stuff, you can use it to actually see the gaps within what you're currently building. So if you have something today and you're a little bit like, oh my gosh, why is this so data congested or data overload? You can actually reverse engineer it by taking that report, creating a story, and seeing where the gaps are. So I encourage you guys to go through this process. I didn't go through all of the stats to show, I showed you guys a few examples, but this has been proven. We have use cases across multiple clients, and I really enjoy sharing this topic because I'm passionate about it, because I know it changed my career, and essentially it made me fall back in love with data again, because I was just getting tired of building reports and tired of being slammed. Okay, so I'm thanking you guys for everything. Ashish, thank you for having me. I enjoyed it, and I think we can probably give everybody back 5 minutes of their time. So I'll just go ahead and I will go to this one. I'll hand it over to you, Ashish. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for thank you for this great session, Mico.
Thank you.
Stay tuned for our next session. It's about Git and concepts and strategy about Git, which will be presented by Lindsay Prackett. Lindsay Prackett, and thank you for all.